I'm Thelma Wade, 26 years old, and last week my world turned upside down at a family dinner. My whole life I've been the invisible one, the one my parents barely noticed next to my sister, the dazzling streamer who could do no wrong. They always praised her, showered her with everything while I was just there. But that night, they pushed me too far. It was Saturday, and we were gathered around the dining table, the usual tension simmering. My mom smiled, her voice syrupy sweet, and said, "Sweetie, your sister needs your room for her live stream studio. It's time to give it up." I froze, fork in hand, my childhood sanctuary, my one safe space slipping away. Before I could respond, my dad slammed his hand on the table, his face red. "Agree or get out of this house," he roared. The room went dead silent. My sister smirked, leaning back like she'd already won. My younger brother shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my eyes. I could have argued. I could have shouted back, listed every time they overlooked me, every moment they chose her over me. But instead, I smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that made my mom's eyes narrow and my dad's jaw tighten. They didn't know what was coming. They thought they could push me around like always. But I had something up my sleeve, something that would flip their world upside down, and it was only a matter of time before they found out. If it were you in that situation, what would you do? Stay silent, fight back, or smile like I did? Comment your answer below. I want to know which path you would choose. Growing up in Richmond, I was always in my sister's shadow. Our family lived in a two-story house in a middle-class neighborhood, the kind of place where everyone knew each other's business. My sister Tonya was the star of the show. She craved attention, always posing for photos, practicing her smiles in the mirror, and dreaming of fame. My dad, a retail manager with a knack for indulging her, and my mom, a bank employee who doted on her every whim, made sure Tonya got whatever she wanted. New dresses for talent shows, dance lessons, even a spotlight for her bedroom performances. They'd clap and cheer, their eyes sparkling as if she was already on a Hollywood stage. Meanwhile, my younger brother Ronald was the baby of the family. He'd toddle around, his arms full of new toys, remote control cars, action figures, you name it. Mom would scoop him up, cooing about how adorable he was, while Dad slipped him extra cookies before dinner. Ronald could do no wrong, his every giggle a treasure. They'd parade him around at family gatherings, showing off his charm, while I sat quietly unnoticed. I was different. I loved books, thick ones about math, economics, anything with numbers that made sense. I'd spend hours in my room scribbling equations or reading about investments, dreaming of a world where I could make my own mark. But to Mom and Dad, my passions were pointless. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" Mom would sigh, glancing at Tonya's pile of pageant ribbons. Dad was blunter. "Those books won't get you anywhere." My room, with its shelves of dog-eared textbooks and a small desk where I'd hide my dreams, was my sanctuary. It was the one place I felt safe, where I could be myself without their judgment. But even that wasn't sacred. When I was 13, I started working weekends at a local grocery store, bagging groceries for a few bucks an hour. I saved every penny, stashing it in a tin box under my bed, hoping to buy a computer to learn more about finance. By 15, I had nearly $500, hard-earned, every cent mine. One day, Tonya came home raving about a talent show that required a fancy video entry. The entry fee was steep, and she needed a new camera to stand out. Without a word to me, Mom and Dad raided my tin box. They took every dollar I'd saved to buy Tonya a sleek camcorder complete with a tripod. "It's for your sister's future," Dad said, not even looking at me. Tonya beamed, already filming herself twirling in the living room while I stood there, my chest tight, my dreams gutted. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I went back to my room, shut the door, and opened another book. That moment lit a fire in me. I wasn't going to beg for their approval or compete for their attention. I'd prove myself in my own way, on my own terms. Every time they praised Tonya's latest performance or handed Ronald another toy, I buried myself deeper in my studies. Math became my escape numbers, my rebellion. I aced every test, stayed late at the library, and taught myself things my teachers couldn't. My room was my fortress where I built my plans to rise above their expectations. Tanya kept chasing the spotlight. She'd drag mom and dad to every talent show, every school play, soaking up their cheers. Ronald, still little, would tag along, his pockets stuffed with candy they'd bought to keep him happy. I'd watch from the sidelines, my nose in a book, ignored. Once at a family barbecue, a neighbor asked what I wanted to be when I grew up. Before I could answer, Mom laughed and said, "Oh, she's just into her boring numbers." Tonya snickered, tossing her hair while Dad changed the subject to her latest audition. I bit my lip and walked away, vowing to show them one day. My room held my secrets notebooks filled with investment ideas, library books on finance, and a quiet determination that grew stronger every time they overlooked me. I wasn't flashy like Tonya or coddled like Ronald, but I had something they didn't: focus. I knew I'd find a way out of their shadow, not by leaving the house, but by building something they couldn't ignore. And I'd do it right here in Richmond, in the room they thought meant nothing. After high school, I started building my dream right here in Richmond. While Tonya chased the spotlight, I turned to something they'd never understand: numbers. I'd always loved how they fit together, how they told stories no one else could see. So I dove in, determined to carve my own path without leaving the house I'd grown up in. I spent late nights in my room poring over library books on finance and free online courses I found on investment strategies. My desk became a battleground covered in notes on stocks, budgeting, and wealth management. I wasn't just studying, I was obsessed. When my mom walked by and saw me scribbling equations, she'd roll her eyes. "Still playing with your numbers?" she'd say, her tone dripping with pity. My dad was worse, muttering about how I'd never make it with my head buried in books. They thought Tonya's auditions and Ronald's charm were the future. I was just wasting time. But I wasn't. I applied for every scholarship I could find, staying up until dawn to perfect my essays. My hard work paid off when I landed a full ride to a local college in Richmond. I studied finance, acing every course while working weekends at a small financial firm downtown. The job wasn't glamorous, filing papers, crunching numbers for clients, but it taught me how real people managed their money. I listened to their dreams, their fears, and I learned how to turn numbers into solutions. By my sophomore year, I was giving informal advice to coworkers, helping them budget or invest small sums. They'd thank me, amazed at the results, while my family had no clue. After college, I didn't stop. I saw a gap in Richmond: people needed personal finance advice, not just corporate banking. So I started my own consulting business right from my childhood bedroom. I built a website on a secondhand laptop, using every trick I'd learned to make it look professional. My first clients were neighbors, small business owners, and retirees who wanted to stretch their savings. I'd meet them at coffee shops, breaking down complex investment plans into steps they could follow. Word spread, and soon I had a steady stream of clients, from teachers to shopkeepers, all trusting me to grow their money. Within 3 years, my business was pulling in millions in revenue. I'd crafted a brand that stood for trust and results, helping hundreds of clients build wealth. But you'd never know it looking at me. I wore the same simple clothes, drove a used car, and kept living in my parents' house, in that same room with my old desk and shelves of books. I didn't need to flash my success. I knew what I'd built. My bank account grew, but I saved every dollar, planning for something bigger, something my family couldn't imagine. They never asked about my work. To them, I was still the quiet kid who'd never amount to much. At dinner, Tanya would ramble about her latest streaming gig, her followers climbing into the thousands. My dad would nod proudly while my mom gushed over Ronald's high school antics, calling him our little star. If I mentioned my job, they'd change the subject or give me that look like I was an embarrassment. "You still doing that number stuff?" Dad once asked, barely hiding his smirk. I'd just nod, keeping my victories to myself. There were moments I doubted myself. One night after Tonya bragged about a brand deal and my mom clapped like she'd won an Oscar, I felt small. I sat in my room staring at my client files, wondering if I'd ever be seen. That's when Phyllis Coleman, my friend from college, stepped in. We'd met in an economics class, bonding over our love for numbers. She came over, saw the weight on my shoulders, and said, "You're doing something real, Thelma. They don't get it, but you're changing lives." Her words pulled me back, reminding me why I'd started. It was the only time I needed that kind of support, and Phyllis was there, no questions asked. I kept going, signing bigger clients, local doctors, small tech startups, while staying under the radar. My parents thought I was scraping by, maybe working some dead-end office job. They didn't know I'd paid off my student loans, saved a fortune, and was already planning my next move. My room, with its creaky floorboards and faded wallpaper, was my headquarters, my proof that I didn't need their approval to succeed. I was ready for whatever came next, even if they weren't. Last Saturday, I sat down at the family dinner table, unaware everything was about to change. The air was thick with the usual chatter, plates clinking as we passed around mashed potatoes and roasted chicken. My mom, always the orchestrator of these gatherings, had that look in her eyes, the one that meant she was about to drop a bomb. My dad sat at the head of the table, his posture rigid, ready to back her up. Tonya was scrolling on her phone, probably checking her latest follower count. Ronald poked at his food, his usual carefree grin absent. I took a deep breath, hoping for once we could just eat without drama. I was wrong. Halfway through the meal, Mom set down her fork and smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Sweetheart," she said, looking straight at me, "we've been talking, and your sister needs your room for her live stream studio. It's time to let it go." My stomach dropped. My room wasn't just a space, it was my refuge, where I'd spent years dreaming, studying, building my business. The walls held my childhood sketches. My shelves sagged with books that shaped me, and my desk was where I'd launched $1 million company. Giving it up for Tonya's live streams felt like erasing everything I was. I opened my mouth to protest, but before I could get a word out, Dad's fist hit the table, rattling the glasses. "This isn't up for debate," he bellowed. "Agree to give up the room, or you're out of this family. No place for you here." His voice echoed sharp and final like a judge's gavel. The room froze. Ronald's fork stopped midair, his eyes darting between us. Tonya leaned back, a smug grin spreading across her face like she'd just won a prize. "Come on," she said, her tone dripping with mockery. "Your boring finance job doesn't need a whole room. What, you need space to shuffle papers? It's not like you're making real money." Her words stung, but they weren't new. Tonya had always acted like my work was a joke, something small compared to her flashy streaming career. She'd brag about her brand deals, her thousands of followers, while Mom and Dad nodded like she was a superstar. My job, helping people build wealth, turning their dreams into reality, was invisible to them. They didn't know I'd built a business worth millions, and I'd never told them. I didn't need their applause. But losing my room, my anchor for Tonya's ego, was a line I couldn't stomach. I looked around the table, their faces a mix of expectation and indifference. Mom's smile was tight, waiting for me to comply. Dad's glare dared me to defy him. Tonya's smirk was practically a challenge, her phone now face down as she savored the moment. Ronald, though, was different. He shifted in his seat, his jaw clenched like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. He wasn't joining in, but he wasn't defending me either, just stuck, caught in the tension. I could have fought back. I could have laid out every sacrifice I'd made, every dollar I'd earned, every client I'd helped. I could have told them my boring job had outdone Tonya's fleeting fame 100 times over. But I didn't. Instead, I leaned back in my chair, took a slow sip of water, and smiled, a calm, deliberate smile that made Mom's brow furrow and Dad's eyes narrow. Tonya's smirk faltered just for a second, like she sensed something was off. Ronald glanced at me, his expression unreadable. They expected me to crumble, to beg, to give in like I always had. But I wasn't that kid anymore. The silence stretched heavy and uncomfortable. Mom cleared her throat, trying to regain control. "It's for the family," she said, her voice softer now, like she was coaxing a child. "Your sister's career is taking off. She needs the space to shine." Dad grunted in agreement, his arms crossed. Tonya tossed her hair, adding, "It's not like you're doing anything important in there." I kept smiling, letting their words bounce off me. My room was more than a space, it was where I'd rebuilt myself, where I'd proven them wrong without saying a word. They thought they could take it, but they had no idea what I was capable of. I pushed my plate away, my smile unwavering. "Let's finish dinner," I said, my voice steady. Mom blinked, caught off guard. Dad's scowl deepened, like he was itching for a fight I wouldn't give him. Tonya rolled her eyes, picking up her phone again, dismissing me. Ronald just stared at his plate, his fingers tapping nervously. They didn't know it, but I'd already made my choice. I wasn't going to argue or plead. I had a plan, one that would turn their world upside down, and I was ready to set it in motion. It started the day after that disastrous dinner. I'd spent years saving my bank account swollen from my consulting business, but I'd kept it quiet, living simply in my parents' house. Their demand to give up my room, my sanctuary, lit a spark. I wasn't going to just leave. I was going to make a statement. I called Ellen Fisher, the real estate agent I'd been working with for months, scouting properties in secret. "Ellen," I said, "I want that house across the street. Let's close it now." She didn't hesitate. "It's yours," she replied, her voice crackling with excitement over the phone. By Friday, the paperwork was done, the payment wired, and I held the deed to a house that screamed everything my family never believed I could achieve. I invited them over that Sunday, not to my new place, but to our usual family coffee at their house. They thought it was just another chance to pressure me about the room. My mom greeted me with that same fake smile, saying, "Have you thought about what we discussed?" My dad grunted, already impatient. Tonya lounged on the couch, scrolling her phone, while Ronald sat quietly, his eyes flicking to me like he sensed something was coming. I took a sip of coffee, set the mug down, and said, "I've made my decision. I'm moving out into the house across the street." Their jaws dropped. Mom's smile vanished, replaced by a confused blink. Dad's coffee mug froze halfway to his mouth. Tonya's phone slipped from her hand, hitting the floor with a thud. Ronald leaned forward, his brow furrowed like he was trying to process it. "What do you mean, across the street?" Dad finally barked, his voice sharp with disbelief. I pulled out the deed, sliding it across the table. "I bought it. Paid in full. Cash." Before they could recover, I kept going. "Oh, and that boring finance job you all mocked. It's not a job. It's my company. I've been running a personal finance consulting business for years. It's worth millions." The room went silent, the kind of silence that feels like it's holding its breath. Mom's eyes widened, darting to the deed like it was a trick. Dad's face turned red, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. Tonya, for once, was speechless, her usual smirk gone. Ronald just stared, his expression shifting from shock to something softer, like realization. Ellen called right then, as if on cue. I put her on speaker. "Congratulations, Thelma," she said, her voice bright. "The house is officially yours." That was one of the fastest cash deals I've ever seen. I thanked her, hung up, and let the words sink in. My family's disbelief was palpable. Mom was the first to break. How did you afford this?" She stammered, her voice a mix of awe and suspicion. Dad jumped in, leaning forward. "Where's this money coming from? You've been living here barely scraping by." Tonya, recovering her edge, scoffed. "Millions." "Yeah, right. You're making this up." But her voice trembled, betraying her doubt. I didn't flinch. "Believe what you want?" I said, my tone calm but firm. "I built a business helping people manage their wealth. I've got clients across Richmond, doctors, business owners, retirees. I didn't need to flaunt it." I stood up, picking up the deed. "I'm moving out, but I'm not going far. You'll see me every day right across the street." That's when they started scrambling. Mom's tone shifted, suddenly sweet. "Honey, we didn't mean to push you out." Let's talk about this. Maybe we can work something out. Dad nodded, his gruffness gone. Yeah, you don't need to leave. We're family. Tonya, ever the opportunist, chimed in. So how much are you making? Maybe I could use some of that for my channel. Her eyes gleamed, already calculating. Ronald stayed quiet, but I caught him looking at me differently, like he was seeing me for the first time. There was a flicker of guilt in his eyes, like he was starting to question the way they'd always treated me. I shook my head, stepping back. This isn't about you, I told them. I'm done being invisible. I'm moving into my house and I'm not here to bankroll anyone. Mom's face fell, Dad's jaw tightened, and Tonya's eyes narrowed like she was already plotting. Ronald, though, gave a small nod like he understood. I walked out, leaving them in their stunned silence, and crossed the street to my new home. Boxes were already packed, my books, my desk, my life ready to leave their house behind. A few weeks later, I looked across at my parents' house, watching it all fall apart. From my front porch, I could see the cracks forming not in the walls, but in their world. I'd settled into my new home, the one I'd bought outright, and every morning I stepped outside, waved, and went about my day. That simple gesture, a casual flick of my hand, seemed to haunt them, a quiet reminder of the years they'd dismissed me. It started with Tonya. Her streaming career, once her golden ticket, collapsed under the weight of her own choices. She'd gotten hooked on online gambling, lured by flashy betting apps promising quick wins. At first, she hid it, posting her usual glamorous videos to keep up appearances. But the debts piled up, hundreds of thousands of dollars more than her sponsorships could cover. Then came the scandal. A rival streamer exposed her gambling habit, leaking screenshots of her bets and debts. The internet turned on her overnight. Her followers dropped, sponsors pulled out, and her carefully curated image shattered. She'd sit on my parents' porch staring at her phone, her face pale like she was watching her dreams vanish in real time. My parents, desperate to save their star, stepped in. My dad, always quick to fix Tonya's messes, and my mom, unable to let go of her pride in her, made a drastic move. They put their house, the one I'd grown up in, on the market. It sold fast, but not for enough. They scraped together every penny to pay off Tonya's creditors, leaving them with just enough to rent a cramped apartment on the outskirts of Richmond. I'd drive by sometimes, seeing their old home empty, a sold sign staked in the yard. They'd traded their stability for Tonya's mistakes, and now they were starting over in a place that barely fit their furniture. Ronald was different. He'd always been the baby, spoiled with toys and attention, but something shifted after I revealed my success. One evening, he showed up at my doorstep, his usual cocky grin gone. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice low, almost breaking. "I never realized how unfair we were to you." He admitted he'd been blind to the way Mom and Dad favored Tonya, how they'd ignored my achievements. It hit him hard, seeing their house sold, Tonya's career in ruins, and me standing tall across the street. He said he was done with the reckless spending, the designer clothes, the parties. "I'm enrolling in community college," he told me, his eyes steady. "I want to study engineering, make something of myself." I nodded, not forgiving him outright, but respecting the change. He walked away, shoulders squared, like he was finally ready to grow up. Every morning, I'd step onto my porch, coffee in hand, and wave at my parents' old house. Even after they moved, I kept the habit, a quiet jab at the years they'd pushed me aside. Sometimes I'd see Tonya visiting their new apartment, her head down, no longer the radiant influencer she'd been. Mom and Dad would call, leaving voicemails about catching up or family unity, but I kept my distance. Their sudden interest felt hollow, tied to my bank account, rather than any real regret. I wasn't cruel. I answered their calls, kept things civil, but I wasn't their ATM. They'd made their choices, and now they were living with them. Meanwhile, I was settling into my new life. Phyllis came over to help me throw a housewarming party. She wasn't there to prop me up emotionally this time, just to help with logistics, picking out decorations and organizing the guest list. We invited my clients' neighbors and a few old classmates, filling my new home with laughter and music. Phyllis buzzed around, setting up tables and joking about my fancy taste in wine. "You're really living the dream now," she said, grinning as she arranged a tray of appetizers. The party was a celebration not just of the house, but of everything I'd built on my own terms. As the weeks passed, I watched my family unravel from afar. Tonia took a job at a local mall, her streaming days over her confidence replaced by a quiet resignation. Mom and Dad adjusted to their new life, their voices tinged with bitterness when they mentioned me. They'd stop by, sometimes standing awkwardly on my porch asking vague questions about my business. "You're doing so well," Mom would say, her smile forced. Dad would nod, adding, "We're proud of you," but the words felt like an afterthought. I'd thank them, keep the conversation short, and send them on their way. They didn't get to rewrite the past just because I'd succeeded. Ronald was the only one who seemed to change for real. He'd text me updates about his classes, small victories like passing a math exam or landing a part-time job. "I'm trying to be better," he wrote once. And I believed him. He wasn't perfect, but he was trying, and that was more than I could say for the others. I'd reply with encouragement, keeping the door open but not wide enough for them to walk back into my life without earning it. From my porch, I'd look at their old house now occupied by a new family and feel a strange mix of peace and resolve. I'd proven myself not just to them, but to me. Their downfall wasn't my fault, but it was a consequence of their choices. And I wasn't done building my future. I've built a life in Richmond that's mine, free from the shadows of my family's expectations. I made a choice to help Ronald wiring money for his college tuition after he showed real effort to change. He texts me updates, grateful, and I'm glad to see him grow, but I've drawn a firm line with Tonia, my dad, and my mom. Their calls go unanswered now, their attempts to reconnect ignored. I'm not here to fix their mistakes or fuel their regrets. They chose to overlook me for years, and I've chosen to move forward without them. Last weekend, I invited Phyllis and a group of friends to my new home for a celebration. The living room buzzed with chatter, the kitchen filled with the smell of homemade food and laughter. Phyllis, always the life of the party, raised a glass and toasted to my journey. To Thelma, who built this from nothing, she cheered, and my friends clapped their support, a stark contrast to the family I'd left behind. We danced, shared stories, and planned for the future, my house no longer just a building, but a symbol of my independence. Looking back, I've learned that self-reliance is my greatest strength. My family's favoritism toward Tonia led to their financial ruin and social fallout, a harsh lesson in the cost of bias. I realized my worth doesn't depend on their approval. It comes from the work I've done, the lives I've changed, and the home I've built. You don't need a family's validation to shine. You need your own resolve. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever felt overlooked or underestimated, I hope this inspires you to keep pushing forward. Share your own experiences in the comments. I'd love to hear how you've overcome being ignored. Your story matters just like mine. Subscribe and let's keep this conversation going.